Well, today is Tuesday, April 16th, and I'm sure you've been wondering, when are we going to get around to the Lord's Prayer in our daily devotions this week? Well, we're finally there. And today we're in Matthew chapter 6, verses 9 through 10, which you'll notice is not the entirety of the Lord's Prayer, but it is the beginning of it. Jesus says, "This then is how you should pray." Remember that Jesus talked about not going on in our prayers and not praying for public appeal or blessing, but rather for that audience of one. And Jesus gives these instructions. "Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done in earth as it is in heaven." Well, I'm going to stop us right there because I think it's important to capture the essence of what Jesus is doing in the beginning of the Lord's Prayer. Recently, as I was beginning to share the sermon this week, I listened to the Lord's Prayer in a number of different translations and even languages. One of the joys that I had was to be able to listen in the language that Jesus himself prayed. That is in Aramaic, which is a relative of the Hebrew language that the Jewish people spoke. We know that Jesus more than likely spoke Greek, spoke Latin because the Roman Empire had domain over Palestine in that time, and he also spoke Hebrew and Aramaic. And so to listen to the words of the Lord's Prayer spoken in Aramaic is a wondrous thing. It's something that we can do today on YouTube if we just look up the Lord's Prayer Aramaic, and maybe it's something that you would find an interest in getting in tune with what Jesus was sharing. But of course, it's important that we actually understand the words. For many of us, we don't speak Hebrew or Greek or Latin or Aramaic, and we can simply pray from a faithful heart to the Lord. You know, the apostle talks about the gift of speaking in tongues, and he says it's an evidence of the Holy Spirit in our lives. But Paul says, "I would rather speak 5 understandable words or intelligible words than 1,000 words in a tongue that people might not understand." Because speaking in tongues encourages us, knowing that the Spirit's in us. But speaking in a language that other people can understand encourages them. And how important it is to do that, to uplift and to build up the church. Well, church, one of the important things for us to remember is to put first things first. When I lived in Waterloo, Iowa, my kids were part of the Stephen Covey learning series, which was Leader in Me. Maybe you're familiar with the 7 habits of highly successful people. And as our kids learned those 7 habits, the first one was put first things first. Well, Jesus is showing us how to put first things first in the beginning of the Lord's Prayer. And that is to start by recognizing that we need God in heaven, and that as we come to God, we want God's will to be done first and foremost. Not our plans, not our will. Even as Jesus prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane and that pivotal and critical crossroads in his life, "Not my will, but your will be done." So I want to encourage you to put things first, because when you do, God's going to bless you with the rest of the journey.